Sherlock Holmes Program 3A has demonstrated some very curious anomalies. Lieutenant Worf can't launch 4A class probes, and Professor Moriarty is brilliant in any century. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 6, Episode 12, Ship in a Bottle, written by Renee Echeverria, directed by Alexander Singer. This was January 23rd, 1993. Where were you? Everybody, we've got a very special guest. He's brilliant in any century. It's the one, the only, the legendary Mr. Daniel Davis. How are you today, sir?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me here.
This is an absolute thrill for us.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, we really appreciate you and your work and the time you are spending with us today. Let's just jump into this. First things first.
Sure.
Had you ever watched Star Trek before? Did you know anything about Star Trek before you auditioned, or did you just go in and say, "Hey, let's see what happens"?
No, I was with Star Trek from the very beginning. I was there with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. Science fiction has always been something that I am drawn to, and almost in any form, I will watch it. And so I was a fan of Star Trek. And then when Next Generation happened, it was very exciting for me because, first of all, the whole concept of the Next Generation was what was so extraordinary about it. It had begun, of course, with Roddenberry's sort of mandate about diversity. And that was very appealing to me right from the very beginning. And then because Patrick Stewart was somebody who I knew from his work in the theater, I thought, this is so brilliant to have, a Shakespearean actor playing Captain Picard. And so, yeah, I was very aware of Next Gen. And then when I got the call from my agents that they wanted to see me for a role, I was over the moon. So yeah, I remember that day very well.
Wow.
Yeah, first, let me say it's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard your name spoken prior to this in conversations where I hear Professor Moriarty, and I'm like, this guy must be big because he's made such an impact. And so, you hear titles of episodes, you hear names of characters that stick over the years, and the chatter is amongst the fans almost eternally because they are attached to these characters and they're impacted by these moments. And so it was a real pleasure for me to really see, oh, this is the moment where I get to dive into a nice Professor Moriarty episode and get, the teeth of what he's about. And what I really think he's about is an excellent adversary, let's say, or a compliment to Picard as far as a challenge to his intellect. And I believe that's what resonated most to me about your performance. I enjoyed the wit. Obviously, your voice, your delivery clearly emanates from the stage and just all of the presence that you brought. But clearly, for me, the most important was the gamesmanship, the outwitting, and that's what I thought was the best about your performance, because Picard, Data, rarely matched with a challenge that seems like somebody's outsmarting them.
Yeah, it was that I loved the first episode. Elementary, Dear Data was a great episode, but Ship in a Bottle for me is one of the best episodes, period, of Next Generation, and not because I'm in it, but because of the concept of it, and the from the very beginning, the combination of the Conan Doyle mythology with the Star Trek mythology was the perfect marriage as far as the fans would be concerned. And the fact that Moriarty started out as, in the first episodes, as a villain, and then things began to evolve for him as he began to recognize his power. And it was a brilliant concept that, he was well, I mean, he manages to take over the ship from inside the holodeck. This is pretty brilliant. and and I loved, because Patrick and I both come from the stage. We had a kind of connection that, I mean, other actors on the show are stage actors as well, but Patrick and I have even played some of the same parts in the theater. So
Really?
we had a lot. Yeah, and we had a lot to talk about, and I think there was a mutual respect between us that showed through in our performances with each other. And I don't know, it was magic. Everything about it was pure magic. The writing.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And, I want to say, because you mentioned that you think it's one of the best episodes of Star Trek. And I want to agree to that point, because one of the things that it touches on is the becoming of sentient life, which is respected, I think, in Picard's initial confrontation with you. I think he's really respectful of the idea that you may have become alive.
Right.
And you can see he doesn't want to, he was delicate with how to treat a new life form, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a great point as far as just that debate in itself is something new. That was a beautiful thing for science fiction.
It's interesting, too, because Descartes, who coined the phrase cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. But what's interesting about that phrase is that the first part of it is left off, because in the actual quote, he says, dubito ergo cogito, cogito ergo sum. I doubt, therefore I think. I think, therefore I am. That's the original quote. And it is the I think part is the part that appeals to Picard, and it appealed to Gene Roddenberry as well. There was an interesting thing that happened in the very first episode. There's an exchange where I say, then you must kill me, when he's saying, I can't survive off of the holodeck. And the line that I had originally was, then you must do murder. Ooh. And we shot it, finished it, and left. And I finished the episode and went off and was about to do something else when my agent called and said, you have to come back because they want to reshoot a line. And they had the set still there. And I came back and I said, then you must kill me, because Mr. Roddenberry came down to the set that day, which he very seldom did, according to Patrick. And he said, I brought you back because I cannot have you say that Picard could do a murder. And so this whole, that's how keen Mr. Roddenberry was on authenticity for the characters and making sure that nobody ever committed to doing something. It was like he said to me, we're going to have you back because Picard has promised to find a way to bring you back. So we're going to do another episode with you. And he said, it'll take a while, but we're going to do it. And then they got into that whole mess when they did Sherlock Holmes and the characters without permission from the Conan Doyle Society, right? So it was a lawsuit. It took 2 or 3 years to solve before I actually got back to do another episode. But it was a big Megillah that just an oversight, that no one really connected. Everyone assumed that it was in the public domain because it had been 50 years since Conan Doyle, more than 50 years since he had died. But that wasn't the case. Anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. I got off on a tangent there.
Not at all. This is great stuff that I hadn't heard before.
This is great stuff. Yeah.
And Daniel, there was another aspect, as Sirach first mentioned one aspect of it, there was another aspect that was really important to your character, which was self-determination. And that's a very admirable motivation. You are a villain. You are not only a villain in the stories, you are basically the villain, or certainly the antagonist of this episode and of the characters. Yet you have these aspects to your characters and these motivations that kind of stop us in our tracks. That it's very, we can empathize with this because the first thing we think is, well, yeah, he should have self-determination. Suddenly, this guy doesn't seem so bad. There's a lot of depth to your character, and you played it so well. Do you remember thinking this or reading the script and really thinking, I can definitely sink my teeth into it?
Yes, I can tell you exactly why. Because having played some pretty dastardly characters in Shakespeare, including Iago, for example, my philosophy about playing villains is that the villain is the hero of his story. The villain does not know that he is a villain. He is the hero to his story. So he has depth, he has humanity, he has a reason, and especially in this context, because without his self-determination, he is going to disappear. He's going to cease to exist. And that is something that, as a sentient being, which he clearly has been programmed to be, and as you will recall, he is programmed by Geordi to be someone who can defeat Data. So his intelligence is that of, he comprehends everything about the ship. He knows everything about the Enterprise, how it works, which is why he's able to function the way he is. But all along, he is wanting to stay alive. And that is the driving force. So I think that's my answer to your question, is that a villain is only a villain. Yeah. A villain is a hero to himself. He's only villainous to other people who are trying to say, we can't have you in our lives and in our culture. And, there are probably examples all over the world and all through history of people that most of us consider to be villainous, but they always had a point of view that we never really gave much thought to.
Absolutely.
And let me also compliment you on the way you delivered those lines in this episode, because I noticed that you didn't have a temper or raise your voice or act violently. You were very manipulative in a intellectual, sophisticated way. And I thought that resonated as well. For example, when you told LaForge, I sense a distressing lack of enthusiasm on your part.
Yes.
And then you up the stakes of everything. And I thought that was such a clever, it was diabolical, but so pleasant for me to watch you engage in. I don't know how else to say it.
That's so kind. Thank you.
The other example of that was when you said, I have nothing to lose, Commander. When he said, this is we're all gonna die. And you're like, well, that seems like a you problem,
Yeah. You're so right. Renee's script was so brilliant. I mean, I don't know if he wrote it completely by himself or if it was a group effort or whatever, but his name is on it. So I give him the full credit for having written an absolutely brilliant script. And that touch of humor is also something that's, it goes back to Conan Doyle as well. I mean, I don't know how many of the Sherlock Holmes stories or books that you have read, but Moriarty is a very clever man. It's not just that he is a clever criminal, it's that he's a clever human being. And he has wit, he has charm, he has sex appeal, he has a woman, and he's a very fleshed out character in the books, and Renee managed to bring all those qualities into this episode. It was like being in a play for me. It really
felt that way.
Yeah, it was that well conceived, that well written, that well directed and acted by everybody in the cast. And so it did feel like we were doing a play.
And Daniel,
one of the concepts is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned the lady, Countess Bartholomew.
Yes.
I have rarely seen a more charming, better actress that just demanded that we watch her. She just blew me away.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the actress Stephanie Beacham?
Stephanie Beacham. Yeah, I can. I adored Stephanie. She has a long history on the stage in England and a long history of television working as well in the States. In fact, she was on Dynasty back in the 80s, I think, and I did 7 episodes of Dynasty, but never got to work with Stephanie. So she brought that same sort of theatricality that I brought to the role, right? And I remember Patrick and I having a funny discussion about what to call her, because her name it was written Regina, and I said, "Are we going to call her Regina or Regina?" And he said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, I don't want it to sound like vagina." And he said, "No, we don't want that." But I said, it's interesting, because the only character in literature right off the top of my head that I could think of at that point was Regina Giddens, who is the villainess in The Little Foxes by Lillian Hellman. And then I said, so that's American pronunciation would be Regina.
Mhm.
But Queen Victoria was known as Victoria Regina. So I think we maybe should call her Regina. And he said, okay, just make sure it's always Regina. So,
Pronounce that R real hard.
yes, hit that R.
Yeah,
So that's how we ended up calling her. But most of the time we just called her the Countess.
yeah,
It was safer.
I that name stood out heavily for me. I'm glad you gave me some background on that. I thought, well, they're really committing to this pronunciation. So,
Yeah, it was a funny conversation to have with Patrick, I tell you. And there wasn't anybody, else to talk to about it at that point. We had to make a decision right then and there. So it ended up being Regina.
now you mentioned Gene Roddenberry, and it's very rare that I think anybody comes here and says that they had conversations with Gene Roddenberry outside of the Next Generation cast,
Right.
and the original series. But tell me about that interaction. Like, was that something that was did you know him prior, or did he introduce
No.
himself, or was his character something personal that meant more to like?
I think they were, I'm going by things that I've been told by Brent and George and LeVar and even Patrick, that the two Sherlock Holmes episodes were very special to Mr. Roddenberry, because he had grown up on the stories and the mythology, and when somebody pitched the idea, he was over the moon for it. So I think it was something that he really wanted to get right, and he wanted to do it well, so that as I said earlier, the fans of that mythology would be pleased to see it. And so, I mean, the depiction that Brent gave of Holmes was so wonderfully accurate, and that sort of grandiosity that Holmes has in the books, and so everything about that was working. His visit to the set happened the second time that that happened the time that I went back to do a reshoot, and we had just rehearsed the moment, and it was clear that Mr. Roddenberry must have been watching in his office on the monitor or something, because the next thing I knew, Patrick said, "Hang on just a minute, we have a visitor," and my back was to his entrance, and so I turned around, and I'd never seen a picture of him, I'd never met him, I didn't know, and he came right up to me, took my hand and said, "I'm Gene Roddenberry, I just want to welcome you back, and I have this line change that's very important." And then he said, "And besides, Picard has promised you in this episode that he will bring you back, and Picard never lies." And I thought, wow. So I thought, well, I'll wait and see. And indeed, as I've already mentioned, it took several years for it to happen. But fortunately for me, I always wore my hair really, really long back in the 80s. So I still had the hair when I got the call to come and do Ship in a Bottle. And I thought, thank God, Bob Blackman would kill me if I'd had a haircut. And and the irony is that I had just signed to do The Nanny, and we were about to shoot the pilot about 2 weeks after I came back to do Ship in a Bottle. So I hadn't cut my hair off yet for The Butler.
Perfect
which
timing.
was a saving grace. Yeah. So
Amazing.
The only thing I didn't have this time, I had gray hair when they brought me back to be on Star Trek Picard. And I thought, do holodeck creations get old?
In sci-fi, anything happens. They can explain anything away. Yeah. And
you mentioned a full circle story, though. I think, right?
The full circle story is about my appearance on Elsbeth
as Dr. Yablonsky.
Yes, Dr. Yablonsky. I've done one episode in each of their seasons now. This is their third season, and I've come back for the third season in the same character. But the full circle about it is that in 1985, I was at the Williamstown Theater Festival, and I was playing General Burgoyne in The Devil's Disciple, a George Bernard Shaw play, playing opposite Richard Thomas and Tom Atkins and Patricia Clarkson's first job out of school, and Dylan Baker's first theater job out of Yale. So it was a very good cast. But in those days, the artistic director did not use union people to build sets and costumes. He charged young students to come and work as apprentices all summer long. And they made the clothes, they made the sets, they did everything. And he assigned me, a young guy who had just graduated from high school, literally just gotten out of the 12th grade, and was about to be a freshman at Yale, where Mr. Sakharopoulos, the artistic director, was teaching. And so this young man was assigned to me to be my dresser because I had a very elaborate wig that had to be reset after every performance, and a British Revolutionary officer's general's costume that had to be, steamed and cleaned after every performance. This young man is now the showrunner of Elsbeth.
Oh, wow.
Yes, his name was Jonathan Tollins. He was my dresser in 1985, and he now is the showrunner of Elsbeth. And I did a Zoom audition for an episode and sent it in. My agent sent it in. And 3 days later, my phone rang, and I've had John in my phone ever since. And we've, not seen each other that much, but he became a very successful playwright, and also stayed in touch with emails at holidays and so forth. And the phone rang, and I looked, and it said John Tollins. And I said, John Tollins, my God, I haven't heard from you in an age. And he said, I know. Don't you think it's about time you come to work for me?
Fantastic.
And so he hired me for that. And he has this thing that is, he's trying very hard to do with this series. He's trying to bring back characters in the same roles, except for the villains. He's bringing back people who've been on the show in the first and second seasons to just do a scene. I went in and I did one scene a couple of weeks ago with Carrie Preston, who is the most delightful person in the world to work with. And so I think it's episode number 5 of season 3, but that's the 360 degrees. It's
That's
sort
amazing.
of like that old saying, Sirach, you've heard it. I know you have. Be nice to the people on the way up because you'll meet the same ones on the way down.
Yeah. So, you never know who you'll be working for. And, speaking of full circle, you had somewhat of a full circle in Star Trek as well, with a different showrunner, season 3 of Star Trek Picard. I don't think you ever expected to hear that phone ring again for Star Trek. I don't know if you're aware, but the fans went ballistic when there was a trailer with your voice, and we were like, are you kidding me right now? We all went nuts. Did you go half as nuts when you got the call?
Oh, I went 20 times as nuts, and I'll tell you why. When I read that Patrick was coming back, I got very excited. First of all I had to hear was da da da, and I was in tears. I mean, the first episode, because I'm just devoted to the series, and I'm devoted to him and his characterization, as I am to all of them. They're such a wonderful group of actors and people. And I started thinking to myself, wouldn't it be interesting if I got a call to do it? And I kept my fingers crossed, and I kept thinking, it's going to happen. First season over, no call. Second season over, no call. And so it was December of 2021. We were in the middle of COVID, and my phone rang. I've told this story so many times, but my phone rang. I said, hello, it's my agent. My agent's voice, who I know right away. He said, we've heard from Star Trek. And I said, yes. And he said, don't you want to know what it? I said, it doesn't matter. It's whatever it is, it's a yes. And so he said, all right, I'll let them know. So they did. It was all about Terry Matalas. I found out later that Terry was a huge fan of Moriarty, of those episodes. And he was, in that third season, starting to bring back, I mean, he brought back basically most of the cast from the original series. Yeah. And he wanted to bring back characters that in his mind stood out for, with the fans and their feelings about it. So I flew out, and of course I think the limo driver gave me a COVID test in the car before we brought to the location. I had more things up my nose than usual during that period, and it was. And I never met Terry until we were in Las Vegas, and I just went over and hugged him and thanked him and said, you made my day. I had written a scenario in my head that the episode was going to be about Picard fulfilling his promise to me to make me a real boy.
Finally.
So that was what I had written in my head. And of course, I never saw the complete script. I saw my sides, and I couldn't make heads or tails of who I was in those sides, because I thought, this isn't the Moriarty that the way we ended it, because he's gone back now to being a villain. He's there with a gun, shooting guns at people, and that's not the Moriarty that we had before. And I didn't know till I watched the episode, literally, what it was about. I knew what I was doing, my function in it, but it was calling everybody's attention to where Data was and leading them to Data, who they were missing. And so I was giving, Jonathan Frakes' character clues about, I'm here to help you find Data. However I have to do it. If I have to shoot you to do it, I will. But that was sort of what my episode was about, which I really put together when I sat down several months later to watch it. So anyway, it wasn't exactly Pinocchio time, was it?
There's still time.
Well, yeah, I definitely, watching you has been one of the great joys of this show. And I would say that, honestly, you're probably my favorite villain on The Next Generation. I know people will have a lot of debate for that and argue there are other villains.
He's a very beloved character.
I would say that you are my favorite because I like complex characters. I like smart characters. I like witty characters. And then I thought also that the real twist on this episode was that you had a dream to find, to be with your love and go back to Earth. And I was like, well, that's kind of not that's not the worst thing. I can kind of, I can
totally relatable, right?
That's reasonable.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, it's extremely human of him to put it. I mean, it's just, he wanted everything that they had. It's what he kept saying to them. I want what you have. It's interesting because I thought there could be, someday maybe there would even be a follow-up to, what was it? It was Harker who said, go to Maris too. They're nice people there.
Yeah, I thought there would be a follow-up too. Yes.
Yeah, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting? But then Stephanie, God love her, Stephanie came to a convention 3 years ago, maybe. It was the first time she'd been invited That was the first time she came. She was absolutely appalled by it. She just said, "What the hell? These people are insane." And she just
Welcome to fandom.
I said,
What?
this is your family, girl. These are people who love you. And she has retired completely from the profession. She lives in Mallorca and she will not leave home.
Wow.
So I think she's been invited back several times and she just thanks them kindly and says no.
Mhm.
At least that's what I've been told.
Well, why would you want to leave Mallorca anyway?
I know, exactly.
Gorgeous there. But Daniel, this has been the thrill of a lifetime. It's been so wonderful to have you.
Pleasure.
Incredible character, incredible actor. You've charmed us out of our seats, both as an actor and as a guest on our show. We can't say enough of our appreciation for you. So thank you very much for hanging out with us for a bit.
Oh, it's been my total pleasure. I hope to see you at some conventions. I hope to meet you in person and we can sit down and have another chat someday.
That would be a real honor.
Yeah,
all right.
It's going to be great.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody, stick around. We've got a lot more coverage of this episode. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule.